To the latest In My Corner with Mark Ash, and I want to introduce to you renowned author Oakley, Dean Baldwin. He has writes a lot of true crime stories, and he's definitely a Buford Pusser historian. So we'll maybe talk a little bit about that. And Oakley, is there anything else you'd like to tell us about you got coming up?
Well, thank you for having me today. We have, my wife and I are actually co-authors. We have 28 books out on Amazon, and most of them are thrillers, true crimes, family mysteries, those type of books. And a couple are what we call unusual circumstances. Some folks would consider, paranormal books, and we can talk about a couple of those also. The Buford Pusser story is real hot right now. The name of our book is Murder of Mrs. Buford Pusser. And my wife and I researched that book about 5 or 6 years ago. And once we started looking at the crime scene evidence, we had a lot of questions, and more questions than we had answers to. So we put the book out in 2021, and last August, the TBI, which is the Tennessee Bureau of Investigations, called us at my house and asked if, is this Dean Baldwin? I said, sure. And he said, hey, I want to let you know I've got your Buford Pusser book, and we're enjoying it, and we actually agree with a lot of your concerns, and we are letting you know that we're going to reopen the cold murder case. And that was August of last year, and we were very pleased that in February of this year, the TBI actually exhumed the body of Mrs. Pusser, who was Pauline Mullins, a distant cousin of mine. And they kept her out for 2 months doing an autopsy on her. So they did a very thorough autopsy, and we're waiting for the results. Hopefully soon we should know something about that.
Yeah, it'd be definitely interesting to hear about that. Now, with me coming out of the professional wrestling industry, I've always known Buford Pusser was a professional wrestler at some point. But, what research I've done, I've never been able to find out anything about his career.
Yeah, he started in the, I would say around 57 or 58, and he wrestled because he got out of the Marine Corps in 56. And finished up high school. He went up to Chicago. He left Tennessee and moved to Chicago, got into the wrestling business. He was known as Buford the Bull, and he was a wrestler on the circuit, and he worked a nightclub, I think, as a bouncer, and he went into I'm going blank now. We'll have to edit this part.
Yeah.
He went into where they work on, what's it called, Doris, with the bodies.
Oh,
He
was a mortician.
Yeah, he went into mortician school, and obviously he didn't like that. But then he met my distant cousin, Pauline Mullins, and they got married in December of 59. He was still wrestling then. He wrestled, I think, for another year or two. And then with the traveling and the new family, he decided to move back to Tennessee, to Adamsville, and ran for office to become the constable of the 3rd District. And at that time, he stopped. So it would have been roughly between 1957 and up to maybe 61 or 62. So I'd say 4 or 5 years in the wrestling business.
Yeah, very interesting. Well, let's move on to your next book, the one I'm looking at right now, on Percy Flowers.
Yep, I'm going to show this up here to everybody. This is our new book. We just released this about 3 weeks ago. Now, J is for Joshua Percy Flowers, the master distiller. He was in Johnston County, North Carolina. He started moonshining in 1919 and got in trouble that same year. He had a stranger was looking into one of his mash barrels, bent over, and he was sitting in the woods watching him, and he had a shotgun with some birdshot in it, and he actually shot him in the seat of his pants, and it turned out to be the Johnston County Sheriff who he shot. So he took off running in the woods, and of course he lost his first steal that he had, and that mash. So his first run-in with the law was in 1919, and he ran moonshine up until the day he died in 1982. So you're looking at 6 decades of moonshining, all up and down the East Coast, all over, basically all over the country. He was, if you put all of the moonshiners that you've ever heard of together, Popcorn Sutton, Hilda Mullins, Amos Owens, Junior Johnson from NASCAR fame, Al Capone, President Kennedy's father, Joseph Kennedy, was a bootlegger of whiskey and moonshine. If you put all of them together, they wouldn't be able to touch Percy Flowers in Johnston County. And you know, that's just a few miles from here where we're located.
Yeah.
And I actually had, when I was a young deputy sheriff in Wake County in 1981, I had a run-in with one of his associates and chased one of his cars probably several miles before he got away from me, down near Homer Bryhopper's Club off of Pool Road and Nightdale Road.
Wow.
So I've got a little personal connection to the story, but this is a very exciting story that no one's really ever heard about. And he's going to be known shortly as the largest moonshiner that's ever lived.
Wow. And you tell us here's where we get to plug you. Where your sales. Where can we find these books? Is there any place online? Do you have a website?
Yeah, there's 2 places. One is if you go to Amazon and type in my full name, Oakley Dean Baldwin, all 28 of our books will pop up. We also have a YouTube channel at Baldwin Stories YT. So YT would be for YouTube. So at Baldwin Stories YT, that's our YouTube channel. Oakley Dean Baldwin on Amazon will bring up our books. We also have our books on Barnes & Nobles, Walmart, and Lulu too. So we're out there. All you got to do is look us up. We have some very exciting true stories. And another true story that I'm going to share with Marcus here in a minute is our Sid Eves Road Lithobolia story,
Oh,
which
absolutely.
is right down the road here.
Mm-hmm.
When hopefully after this interview, I get to take you and your wife down and show you all about it. Tell you
Yeah,
all about it.
I'm very interested. I'm very interested in seeing it because, like I said, you know, as well, I mean, it's no secret to probably most of the people watching this. You know, where I do independent filming, and that is a story I am very, very interested in, and it's one right literally in my backyard. So.
Yeah, those are the best ones.
Absolutely.
In the backyard, you know, where you don't have to spend a whole lot of effort or time, or go somewhere and spend the night at a motel and be away from your family.
Mm-hmm.
Those are always hard. People don't realize the back work of what you're doing, you know, and even an author, you know, if you have to go to Pound, Virginia, we have a book called Killing Moonshine Mullins, which is the Pound Gap Massacre, which my grandmother's cousin Ira Mullins was pulling moonshine across the Pound Gap into Kentucky and Virginia, and they got ambushed by Doc Taylor and the Fleming brothers, and it's a great chase and the shootouts, hangings, more shootouts, more chases. It's a wild story. It's probably as good as any Hatfields and McCoys. I love the Hatfields and McCoy stories, but that's you know, a 6-hour drive from here up to Pound. Stay a couple nights doing storytelling events and book signings and those type of things. It's so much easier when you have something right in your backyard, a 10-minute drive from your house that you can get to. And like I said, it's real important too as we get older that we try to spend more time with our family. You know, I'm retired now, my wife's retired, so we're full-time authors now, basically, is what. Because we do a lot of research in our books, we spend a lot of time, sometimes up to 2 years, researching a book before we put it out.
Wow. And like I said, I'm definitely interested in reading and hearing all the stories you can share with me about that.
And we have, you know, the Matewan Massacre, which we call the Matewan Effect Bloody Mingo book, which is the true story of the Baldwin Detective Agency, who I'm also related to. They went down to Matewan because the local sheriff would not set out 6 coal miners who had joined the union against the owner's policy, and they were living in company homes. So if back in the 1920s, before the FBI was formed in 1936, if you had a local sheriff that wouldn't perform their duties, what they did is on the West Coast they would hire the Pinkertons to do the law enforcement, but on the East Coast they would hire the Baldwin Detective Agency. And that's the only choices you had before the FBI. So the coal miner owners hired the Baldwin detectives. They came down from Bluefield, West Virginia, and 12 of the agents came down, and they set out the 6 families, of course. And it was very tense. They had their weapons out, and it was raining a little bit, and they did set the women and children out into the street. You know, and that really made a lot of people mad. But the police chief in Matewan was a man named Sid Hatfield, who was the nephew of Devilettes Hatfield from Hatfields and McCoy's fame. So he said that those Baldwins, when they come in town, we're not going to let them leave, basically. So he told about 300 coal miners to go home and get their weapons and wait for his signal. So when they came in, I don't want to give the whole story away, but when they were 3 miles out into the county, when they came back into town, they ate dinner and they got ready to get on the train, and there was a massacre basically at that point. And that's an awesome story. Now, James Earl Jones did a movie called Matewan back in 1987, and my wife and I, we love the movie, and we actually have a copy of it at home on a VHR, I guess it is, of one of those VHSs or whatever. The old style.
Yeah, the generation watching us right now probably have never seen one.
Maybe never even heard of one.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's an awesome movie. I loved it. Unfortunately, it has nothing to do with what actually happened that day. So our book actually clears up what happened. And here's the kicker. Our book is actually 100 times better than that movie. I mean, as far as thrilling and the actual evidence that we present in the book, from the court records, from the courthouse, from the hearings, from the trials, from the eyewitnesses. So, you know, those are the type of stories that we like to write.
Good. Now, tell us a little about your background, because I know you were telling me on the phone yesterday you got quite a resume, especially in law enforcement.
Yeah, I started out with the West Virginia State Police. I worked with the state for several years. My wife and I moved down to Raleigh, North Carolina, and shortly I found out that I missed law enforcement, so I got back in. I went to work at Wake County Sheriff's Department, and I retired there in 2012. I'd done patrol. I worked courthouse supervisor. I was the director over the pistol permits. I was the director over the sex offender investigators, weapons of mass destruction, carry concealed permits. I was the custodian of records for the sheriff. So I have 34 years as a sworn law enforcement officer in 2 different states. Then also on a part-time basis, I worked part-time 30 years for the Fairgrounds Police, which I retired out there as a captain with them. I worked 10 years with Morrisville Police part-time. I worked 30 years with the U.S. Coast Guard and retired as a Chief Warrant Officer 4 as an intel officer with the Coast Guard. I love that. I was also a boarding team member on a 41-foot law enforcement boat for about 12 years. So I have a lot of sea stories to tell with those. My wife and I have so many stories to tell, I probably won't live long enough to write them all. But I always try to keep 2 or 3 books in the queue, waiting to go, in case, you know, I get to a point where I get to a block or get a little, I can't find what I need, I'll set one aside and then start back on one of the other ones with a fresh mind and a fresh start.
Absolutely. I understand that. I recently got into writing because I've been writing scripts for some of the videos from my ministry and stuff that you see on all the social medias. And you know, for those of you who think I'm kind of like slurring and stuttering, I'm not impaired. If you remember my dysautonomia support network. So if you visit dysautonomiasupport.com, it'll get you to our Linktree account, which will get you to our Facebook account, and it'll get you a one-on-one. You know, if you need one as an advocate because of everything I've gone through to get here. You wake up some mornings, this is the way you talk. It's not, and you have no control over it.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want anybody to think in any way, shape, or form that I'm impaired. And just wanted to give the chronic illness outreach there.
Well, share about your wrestling experience also. I'm interested in that. We talked about Buford and his wrestling.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah, talk a little bit about yours.
You know, I mean, I was born in, you know, 71. So I grew up, you know, in the days of watching, you know, Jim Crockett Promotions here in the Carolinas, as it was until it turned into WCW or in 87, 88 era. But so yeah, all the greats: Ric Flair, Wahoo McDaniels, you know, superstar Billy Graham. Anybody that was anybody at some point came through, you know, this territory. And my grandfather, he had it on one Saturday night when I was, you know, at his house, and I was hooked from there. And then with my dad being a professional musician at the time, kind of more into rock and roll bands, and he played, you know, a lot of hotels and stuff. And he was a disc jockey during the days. Well, I'm living in Wilmington. That was a regular stop for Jim Crockett Promotions. So we got to know, you know, guys, you know, like they were my heroes, you know, Ric Flair, Dusty Rhodes, you know, Wahoo McDaniels. I mean, whoever I wanted to meet backstage, I got to meet through the fact that he was always, his radio station always assigned him to the wrestling matches when they came. And then plus, he knew a lot of them from playing at the hotel. And, you know, and so I was getting to meet them, and it was even better. And, you know, as I was getting older, you know, and what do I need to do to get prepared for this? You know, and I want to say it was Ric Flair that said, wrestle in high school, so that when you get to professional wrestling school, you're going to breeze through because you already know how to wrestle. Mm-hmm. You know the basics. Right. That's part one. He says, now, take drama, learn the theatrics. The less theatrics we have to teach you, the better. He says that way we teach you when you really only need to learn the ring psychology part, and you will be in the ring a lot faster than the other guy that just signed up that didn't do any of that.
Right.
Because there's so much that you already know we don't have to teach you. And so I did, you know, because my wife and I, you know, we're boyfriend and girlfriend back in what they call middle school now. It was junior high school in our days. And, you know, matter of fact, we took drama together. And I was on the wrestling team. Went 5th in the state my first year.
Nice. We have a lot in common. Mm-hmm. I worked the Dorton Arena and from the late 80s into the early 90s. So I got to work almost every single wrestling match and got to meet the same heroes that you're talking about. Mm-hmm. You know, the Ric Flairs, of course, and Sting came, and the Nick Foley, all these famous. These young folks now probably wouldn't have a clue who we're talking about. But the old timers, And I worked for Bruce Noonan, and he was the police chief in Morrisville, and he was actually Mr. Wrestling for, I guess, about 10 years. And everyone thought he was joking when he talked about being a wrestler until he did a fundraiser and brought all these old timers into Morrisville and set up a ring and raised money for some children who had been bit by a dog that had rabies, and they didn't have insurance. So he raised a lot of money for them. But one of the people that really stood out was the Boogie Woogie Man. You remember?
Yeah, I
him?
remember. Yeah, I knew Jimmy. I know Jimmy very well.
Jimmy Valiant.
Yes.
Yeah. And of course, Bruce won the match. He had his police chief hat on, and they had a free for all, and all of them in the ring. And he got the last one out and actually won the match, which was pretty cool.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Wrestling business is a little weird because they kind of did him an honor because it's in most cases, if you're in your hometown, you lose. If it's your birthday, you lose. I mean, that was the way they did it when they worked the circuit. If you're in your hometown, you lost. If it was your birthday, you lost. I mean, that was, even if that wasn't a story we were telling the night before and the night after, those 2 days, boom, you know. It's a business that'll lure you in and chew you up and spit you back out, because that's why I think I got a lot of the physical problems I've got. I've had a rebuilt foot. I've got hardware in my back and upper neck, and it was a rough business.
I could imagine. Yeah, I did some Golden Glove boxing back in the day, and after a couple of years of that, a couple of fights, I decided those trophies weren't worth getting your brains beat out, you know. So I gave that up. Plus, I was married. My wife kind of frowned on me going on a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday and doing a 3-day boxing matches, you know. So I gave that up after a couple of years in the early '80s. But we're young. We learn as we get older. Now, I do have some interesting things coming up, so we definitely want to get back together. I have some things that I can't share right now that are really, hopefully they're going to pan out. You never know.
Right.
In that business, but my wife and I are always writing new books. We have a couple. She has a wonderful cookbook that she's writing, and it's almost ready. Good old country girl cooking, you know, that kind of thing. She's from West Virginia, and that's going to come out hopefully, you know, by the end of this year or first of next year. There's no time frame on her. And she has a wonderful book that she's called Suddenlies, which when God shows up suddenly, where she went on 3 missions trips to other countries, and God showed up and helped her on all 3 of them. And one of the stories where they were on a bus, and you know, when you're in a third world country and a little group of men show up with AK-47s and fatigues, and they board the bus, and you're told to keep your head down and not look up at them, and they're talking in a foreign language and you don't know what's going on, it's pretty scary. And they didn't know if they were going to be taken captive or what, but God intervened and turned it around, and they showed some papers and they were allowed to travel on. But it was, because they knew they were medical missions. You know, they did dental work and eyeglasses and prescription meds, handed out, aspirins and pulled teeth and those type of things. So they would line up. These people were in such a need for help that they would line up for miles in their best clothes, their best dresses, and their children, and they would be yelling at the buses as they went by. They would yell and be clapping. They'd yell, "Blondie, Blondie," which meant American to them. And once they got there, they would stay all day, and 12, 14 hours the doctors would work, and the dentists and the nurses. My wife was a nurse back then. So that's going to be a wonderful book once we get that one out. I'm looking forward to that one.
Yeah, I'd be interested in that myself, and I can definitely tell you that sounds like something my wife would be interested in. You can actually hear her smiling behind the camera over there.
We have one other faith-based book called Whosoever, that next time we get up with each other, I'm going to give you and your wife a copy of that. It basically, we use common sense and science to prove creation. So it's a real cool book for someone, especially who's on the fence. They're not really sure what they believe. In fact, I'm going to donate a handful of them to your group, your Christ Search group.
Thank you, sir.
Because that book will really open the eyes through common sense and, like I said, through science. We've had science used against us in public schools for so long that we finally are getting some footing now with just by telling the truth about what science and what creation is really about.
Right, yeah, so, absolutely. And that's right now, that's why I'm so proud of the state of Louisiana putting the 10 Commandments back in the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
And the rest of the states should follow suit.
I agree.
And like, of course, I mean, that's probably what's going on with me a little bit. I'm exhausted because I gave quite a speech last night on the Christ Surge event. And you can check that out on our same YouTube channel, Mark Ash Motivation. And of course, Dean here, he's going to put it on the Baldwin Stories channel. And is there any other books or stories you want to tell? Any personal stories you want to tell us about from your law enforcement career?
Well, actually, this Cities Road that I'm getting ready to show you after we're done here, that's a personal story. I was on patrol when that happened. I have a book called Mayhem on the Mountain, which was my very first murder that I was involved in, and it's a real thriller. So if you really enjoy true crime and thriller books, that's basically what we've been into. And we're pretty diverse. We actually have a child's book called Camper and Katie's Constitutional Quest for children. So we're out there with pretty much everything but romance. The market is saturated with romance books, so we're not going to be writing any romance. Even though my wife and I have been married a long time, we're working on 50 years. So, but that's pretty much the only thing we haven't written. Everything else in between, we have something for everyone.
All right, and once again, tell us where we can find these.
Yep, on Amazon, type in Oakley Dean Baldwin, and YouTube channel at Baldwin Stories YT, at Baldwin Stories YT. Those will bring up everything that we have.
Absolutely. And fans, I won't announce a guest for the next one because I'm still working on it right now. But we will definitely, once again, want to push his books here, Oakley Dean Baldwin on Amazon.com, because these stories are awesome. And I would definitely want to see these places we're about to go. And I am going to be working with my crew. I think we may be able to make a little movie out of that.
That'd be nice. That'd be really nice. Thank you for having me.
Yes, sir. Thank you for being here, and hopefully we'll do this again soon. Because, like you said, you got some stuff upcoming you can't talk about just yet. So when you can, I definitely want to get you back on.
You'll be one of the first ones to find out.
All right, I appreciate it, and God bless everyone that's watching. And you can visit our ministry at ChristSurge.com, and you get all the information. And once again, thanks for watching. Have a great day.
All right.